These models were first primed with black and given a zenithal spray of white ink via an airbrush. I then give each miniature an anti-zenithal spray of a color that will make up the majority of the figure. In this case, the bones for, well, bones, the armor for Nasty Knight, and the flesh for Pudgy Pig, who I hated when I watched Power Rangers many years ago, but now I realize he's one of the few monsters I actually remember, so I suppose now in my old age I have developed a soft spot for him. That or I'm just hungry. Damn it, a pork chop sandwich sounds pretty good right now. I then reapply a zenithal spray of white ink from above. The reason I'm doing this a second time is because I'll be applying Army Painter speed paints with the airbrush in a few moments, and the white zenithal will help this stand out as well as blend into the shadows created by the anti-zenithal sprays. When spraying speed paints, it's important to know that though they are fairly transparent at first, they quickly become saturated and can overpower other colors if you're not careful, but they give a very nice finish. Now, done with the airbrush, I head inside to my desk. Here's a quick look at where the airbrush has gotten me. The glossy shadows are from the golden paints that I had used. Before I pick up my brush, I decided to try something smart and plan out the order of steps that I'm going to take, and I built a small table that I'll be following, from top down and then left to right. The order of the colors used was determined mainly with two things in mind, with the first being to knock out the metallics first. I much prefer to cover up any metallic overbrushing instead of vice versa, so I want these out of the way. I just have to remember to swap out my rinse cup's water before moving to the non-metallic paints to prevent errant metallic flecks from contaminating the basic acrylics, or worse, damaging my brush. The second consideration is the finishing point for each model, such as Nasty Knight and Pudgy Pig being finished after the red paints are applied, and Bones after the feathers are painted. Now, armed with a plan, I start base coating all of the gold paints, as I knew this would be one of the more time consuming steps. The metallic paints I'm using are from Vallejo's Metal Colors line, and these paints are incredibly runny. To ensure I can maintain control of them, I load the brush and then wipe most of the paint away onto a paper towel before applying it to the model, as this will prevent it from running wild all over the airbrushed areas. I apply the first highlight over roughly 50 to 60% of the surface area, mainly towards the upper facing areas and edges. Again, I load the brush and wipe excess paint onto a paper towel before applying paint to the model. I take my time and remain vigilant against errant brush strokes, especially when turning the model in my hand. The second highlight is then applied, covering about 25% of the surface area, focusing on places that can be viewed from overhead or otherwise as edge highlights and corner dotting. To finish off the gold areas, I apply a little transparent brown ink in the lower areas or recesses to add some darker tones for shadows. Moving on to the silvers, I start with a base coat of burnt iron. I like this color as it's very close to Army Painter's gunmetal, though I think I'll be tweaking this recipe in the future for a darker metallic as the base coat. I prepare my brush the same way with these silver metallics as I did with the gold, and with a minimally loaded brush and careful not to have any errant brush strokes where I do not want metallic paint. The first and second highlights are applied in the same manner as I painted the golds, covering increasingly less surface areas and focusing the highlights onto edges or areas that are only visible from overhead. Though it doesn't seem like it took very long to complete these highlights, the reality was it took a very long time, nearly 6 hours across 5 models, with 2 not being shown in this video. The base coats for the gold and silver took 2 coats for full coverage, and the surface areas are quite large, being that there are very few details, and each of these models are a 48mm scale. Pudgy Pig, for example, is massive. This beast is all cabeza. His pillow is big as shit. Couple that with the fact that his weapons, or cutlery I guess, extend out so much that I had to be very cognizant to avoid errant metallic strokes on his outstretched arms. But I keep at it and manage to finish the metallics with only a couple of small mistakes that I was able to clean up immediately with a clean, wet brush. I decided that I'd knock out the eyes next, which would be mostly an easy task since Bones is just hollow sockets and a skull, and Pudgy Pig has solid black eyes. I also paint in their nostrils while I'm at it. Nasty Knight, however, does have human eyes, and unfortunately they're recessed pretty deep beneath the helmet. I was able to get an angle for the brush while I could see what I was doing, but barely so. With the sockets blacked out, I laid down some off-white to create the sclera before adding black for the pupil. I didn't bother giving a ring of color first for the iris, as this was difficult enough as with it being recessed so much. Ultimately, I'm pretty happy with the eyes and their orientation. I'm definitely getting some Batman vibes from them. I then add some gloss varnish over the pig eyes and call the eyes done. Moving on to the tusks and hooves, I apply murky brown as a highlight to the bottom half, since there's already a darker tone from the anti-zenithal spray with the airbrush. I also paint the teeth with this color. I then apply a smaller highlight of raw sienna over some of the lower areas and the upper parts of the hooves. The teeth are also highlighted with hatching lines, just like the hooves. I repeat the highlights on the hooves and teeth with off-white hatching lines. These I try to make smaller and finer than the previous highlighting hatching lines. I finished the hooves with some transparent brown ink to create some grimy stains. The red areas took quite a long time, but in the grand scheme of things, only a simple base coat followed by a shade and 2-layer highlights, with the last highlight only being done in hatching lines. The main reason this took so long was only due to the very large surface areas on Bones and Pudgy Pig. All in all, the red areas took about 3.5 hours of effort. Taking a quick peek back at our chart, we can see that Nasty Knight and Pudgy Pig are done, other than the base. So let's move on to finishing Bones, resuming with painting in the black tones for his hat and belt, the base coat being just a flat black. I mix the same flat black with the dark blue to create the first highlight. The second highlight is the same mix with a small amount of off-white mixed in. The highlights are more of a dark blue into a dark bluish gray. It keeps the hat very dark with noticeable highlights, but keeps it from looking like it's a gray color instead of black. For the feathers, I base coated them with the same mix I used as the final highlight for the black clothing on Bones. The first highlight is then mixed from the same dark blue and off-white that was used to create that base coat, minus the dark black. The second highlight I make with an off-white as edge highlights and hatching lines before adding a pure white edge highlight to the upwards facing parts of the feathers. With the 3 48mm models finished, I can finally knock out the bases and call it a night. Or should I say, nasty night. I throw some AK Interactive's concrete texture paste down to break up the flatness of the base, and once dry I coat it with Army Painter's Burnt Moss Speed Paint. While that's drying, I hit the rim with flat black. With everything dry now, I applied PVA glue over the base and spread this around with a damp brush before sprinkling on some green flocking. I then brush away any flocking from the models and breathe a sigh of relief that another week of painting has been achieved. This is where I stopped. In the end, these models look very basic as far as painting techniques or applications of any semblance of skill, but I'm good with that considering that the actual costumes from the television show look pretty close to these. I'm really happy with how the flesh on Pudgy Pig came out, and there could have been some better highlights, especially for the red clothing, as well as the silver metallics, where I may have used some transparent blue ink to create some tonal variation for shadows. And the most egregious of errors, as always, is some bad mold lines that I thought I cleaned up well enough, mostly on Pudgy Pig's hair and on the sides of bones. Taking a final look at my painting chart, I initially intended to include Madame Woe and Rita in this video, but I ran out of time, so they'll have to wait for another day. The good news is that they're already well on their way to being complete, with the items highlighted in yellow being all that remains to be done for them. And that'll bring this video to its end. I hope you learned something or inspired to start your own collections of monsters molded from clay by the Wicked Finster, so that you too can emerge from a 10,000-year slumber in a cylindrical dumpster on the moon and attempt to conquer the Earth, only to be thwarted time and again by overachieving and impossibly moral and just teenagers. If you have any questions, feel free to ask, and if you like the content of this video and would like to see more, you can easily support the channel by liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing. I'm Jim with Working with Miniatures. I'm truly grateful for your time, and I bid you a fond farewell. Until the next video.